gentlemen of the lateral jokesters verse, welcome to another video of George puts the random ideas that resides within his brain into function and into practice. This is the board game Axis and Allies. It's based upon the Second World War, I believe 1944. And, of course, it is, a board game that I like. So you will not be able to see all of the pieces in movement. You'll get to see the main board, but we're not going to be playing by normal rules. You couldn't tell by the fact that I have not set up any of the pieces yet. We will not be playing with what I call original capitals. So instead of having like German units here on the gray, originally German spaces, Russians, Americans green, Japanese, and the British are brown, you get the point. Instead of having them where they should be, instead, they will be placed by a random wheel, which will dictate where they start the game at, as well as their starting currency. Note, I'm not memorizing all the currency they get. We have this little nice plaque here, which keeps track of it. Which, while we're on that, this is a new rule set made alone by me. This is why I've decided to make this video by myself playing the game, is to prove that later, because I'd like to later have friends play this game with me, ideally 5 people, because this is a free-for-all, not like the original where you'd have 2 teams, being the Axis, Germans and the Japanese, versus the Allies, British, America, Russia, because, well, this is a free-for-all. I'd like to have 5 people play a kind of Risk style, where, you spread out and you want to rule the world. So I'd like the general rules, at least the rules as they differ from the original Axis and Allies rules, out there before I put it on the internet with me playing it with friends. So here I am playing it alone. This little rules chart, anyway, back to that, is how do you win? Well, there are 2 victories. You either absolute victory, that you are the only person who remains. You have wiped all other players off the board, everyone else is dead but you. The other is an economic victory. This sort of prevents the game from going on forever. If you could see that, the money counter, so we would put a little flag indicating how much money you make per turn, caps off at 45. This means if you, for 1 turn, make more than 45, the other players have 1 turn to knock you down back below 45, or else the game is over, you've won. Seems simple enough. You also have this nice little attacker board to remind you of how each piece rolls, and you would roll the dice in the lid of the box. So you will not be able to see too much of the roll. You'll get to see some of it off to the side here when I throw the dice, so you'll actually get to see me throw it, but you won't generally be able to see, if I'm telling the truth, just take the trust that, I'm playing against myself. I have no reason to cheat. I have no favorites towards victory. Anyway, your starting capital is dictated randomly. Your capital, once it has been decided, which will be decided here in a moment, you will roll for Russia first, because Russia always starts the game. Then it goes turn movement is Russia, Germany, Britain, Japan, America. Once your capital is decided, you put 2 of your flags on it, stacked on top of each other. Capitals play the same way they always did. If your capital is taken, you lose all your money. But not this capital. Like, this capital is just a really expensive space now. Like Berlin, Moscow, DC, Tokyo, and London, they're just really expensive territories now. They're not game enders. It's wherever this wheel indicates that you start. Okay? I'm going to spin the wheel. And this is Russia's new capital. French Indochina Burma. Which French Indochina, yes. It's here. It used to be a Japanese space, but in this version of the game, we'll start off the Matalan. Okay. Removing that because they can't have the same capital. Going to again. Deutschland, King Tang. As always, by luck have it, the Germans, as with original history, with the Germans and Russians being right next to each other, the Germans and the Russians are right next to each other, because King's Hang is right there. It is also formerly a Japanese territory, but in this version of the game, it will be the homeland of Germany. Which I guess isn't really Germany, because they're not anywhere near Europe. But ignore that. It's Germany. He's using calling them gray. Philippine Islands is where the British will be starting. British will be starting in the Philippines. Philippine Islands. We will then be following. This is the spin for Japan. Caucasus. Japan has some pretty decent isolation, which can be a very helpful early game. They're way over here and everyone else is way down there. Now the United States. Where will the United States start the game at? Right now we have no players in anywhere but Asia. Or I guess Philippine Islands would count as Australia in act and risk or whatever. Karelia SSR. So now the Japanese have a little bit of contention because the United States is going to start right on top of them. Right here. Now, pretty much that ends the setup for this version of the game. No pieces start off the board, but you may ask, then how do you get play units? You grab yourself a deck of cards. While I shuffle them up with this deck of cards, what you're going to do is this will actually give you special units. Number cards are pretty simple. They give you the number of bonus infantry, which means it'll be on addition to what you can afford to buy, which on the starting gate no one can because no one has an industry, so you can't buy anything. Traditional units. But face cards give you special things, which will be allotted as face cards get pulled. I kind of play until I've at least pulled all the face cards, and I'll probably play until there's a winner. So, thus we begin. Another optional rule that I am engaging for this style is free targets. So, in the game there are some pieces, being the industries and the anti-aircraft, that as you can see they're not colored to any specific territory. Because anyone can play these two units. And if you invade a territory that has one, well, it becomes yours. It becomes your piece you can use. So, you can start the game of this version with putting some of those free units on territories where they would have originally been. Because, randomness decided where everyone started, so it doesn't favor anyone. And does put, anti-aircrafts in the game, because, otherwise no one goes out of their way to buy an anti-aircraft. They're too expensive and too ineffective. So, there you go. This is where the anti-aircraft will be located. So, you start off game. Now, normally you would keep, and I'm going to keep this under the board so it doesn't block where they can actually buy stuff. Each one is going to submit a flag for for your starting industry, which your starting industrial value is the cost of whatever territory you were luckily given. Now, for this game, unlike many others I've rolled, everyone gets to start the game with a territory that makes money. So nobody starts with an IPC value of 0, which makes the game a whole lot tougher on that particular player. I actually think we are all equivalent. I think we all got 3 spaces. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Yeah. Everyone starts on 3. This game could not be more equal right now. Everyone starts at 3. Everyone has 3 now, so with that in context, we're going to start the Russian turn. The Russians cannot afford to buy an industry, and they have no point in buying anything else without an industry or an industry on the board for them to use. They get 6 infantry from their card, and there ends the Russian first turn. The Germans, they pull a 10. Thus ends the German turn. British pull a 6. Once again, because everyone's equal, I already told you, nobody can afford to pay for anything. So all of the units they get on this first turn have to be free. They really do not have a choice. The Japanese pull an 8. Thus ends the Japanese turn, and the Americans pull a 5. And thus ends the American turn. Now the Russians know that they are down in units. They cannot afford an industry yet, because it will take 5 turns for anyone to buy an industry and start using their money. The Russians know that they can't defend against the Germans with that number, so they pull another card, they get a 4. Russians get an additional 4 units and do nothing else. Thus ends the Russian turn. Now the Germans have 10. The Germans do not have enough to take on the Russians. However, the Germans deem it worthy. They're going to turn one of their ships into a solo infantry all by himself here. And he's going to go on an adventure. He's going to step over here into undefended Manchuria, capture it for the Great Deutschland, and double the German financials by jumping. As you can see, Manchuria is worth 3, doubling the Germans' value and putting the Germans financially in the lead. And the Germans overwhelmingly in the lead going forward. The British can't do anything. They're not threatened, but they don't have a ship, so they can't move. So they'll draw a card. They get another 6 units. And that's all the British can do. Now the Japanese know that they have the numbers, and actually might have enough numbers to surmount the Americans. And the Japanese decide to make this game nice and risky, and they're going to invade the US capital of the SSR Karelia and attempt to knock them out of the game nice and early. The United States gets a defense of 5 2s. That is what an infantryman gets on defense against the Japanese onslaught of 8 1s. Okay, so the Japanese are going first. They're going 6 for 1, going 6, aiming for 1s. Got 1 hit. They got 2 going for 1s. 2 hits. Got 2 hits. The Americans got 5 because you don't clear characters to the end, so defenders, even if they're shot, they still get 1 shot. 5 looking for 2s. All misses. It's not very good for our good old boys in blue. This might spell doom for America in this game. The Japanese fire again, 6-1. 1 hit. 2 1s. No hits. Americans, 3 twos. No hits. One more American down. Japanese again going. 6-1. 2 hits. They both hit. Americans, 2 twos. Both missed. Complete strikeout on the American defense. Not completely out of the game. Japanese knocked the United States because they took the American capital, and the Americans do not have any other units on the board. America is done and will no longer participate in the game, and Japan is awarded America's money as of when America was defeated. This also doubles the Japanese financial standing, jumping up to 6, and knocks the Americans off the board entirely. Rest in peace, my nation. America would have been the next turn, so. And the Japanese claim Karelia. So, that brings an end. The Japanese draw their card. The Japanese get a king. Now a king plays nice and special. A king is why you is a face card. Now you may have recalled that I said face cards get to play fun. They're special. Well, they do get to play fun, and they do get to play special. When you draw a king, the king allows you to take one of these nice capitals, the 5 that were originally on the board, for free. You heard me, for free. Or to send 1 infantry to redefend an undefended capital that is actually someone's capital. I guess I should say the king will allow you to take with 1 free infantry the least defended capital dictated by random if it's a tie. So like right now, excluding, the Russian, German, British, and now and American capitals, all other capitals are undefended. So that means they are all tied and will otherwise all be in here. They can now take Caucasus because they left Caucasus undefended, which is their own capital, because they wanted to take out the Americans. They could also take the United States, England, Germany, Russia, Japan, because they had also undefended capitals for free, dictated by random. The United States. Japanese get to send 1 little free guy over here and make what was formerly the United States capital in the original game their cap. Makes it not their capital, but part of Japan. Which means now Japan jumps up from that little 16 up to 18 because they now have a ridiculously valuable territory, and basically both Europe and North America is their oyster. So, game's looking pretty short, but is now the USSR's turn. Now the Russians last turn successfully frightened off the Germans' attack. However, the Germans still have enough manpower to threaten the Russians if the Russians would try to, do anything spicy. So the Russians have little choice but to draw a card again. Now they got a queen this time. A queen gives you a bomber. Now bombers are really terrible on defense, and does propose the Russians a wee bit of a problem if the Germans would decide to re-rally up and attack them, but are fantastic on offense, which means, the Germans might now have to take that into consideration. Okay, this ends the Russian turn. It is now the German. The Germans do not have enough money to purchase an industry, so now the Germans have no military option, but they're going to invade Ukraine here. Move up into Ukraine. Take another $2 for the German Empire. Germans draw a card. In the turn, they get 2. That might be dangerous for our friends, the Germans, because they know the Russians are eyeing up their capital. Russians might decide there is only a 2 additional defense. It might be worth it for a Russian invasion. They've just sent their only bonus infantry away. Britain. Britain is still landlocked and still cannot afford to purchase an industry. So they have no option to take their card. Ah! They drew another king. It's another king. So now there is one less capital that has been undefended. But they have a huge bonus. Because, not just because they now get to expand beyond their little island, but they could take Caucasus. Because the Japanese did not reinforce Caucasus. Because they didn't have units to. All of their units went. Or they can knock the Japanese out of the game because the Japanese now have 2 other territories. They can take all of that nice cash that the Japanese have right now. That's what happens when you invade a capital. Or they could just get a nice free cash cow territory. But this is decided by the random wheel. Tokyo. The British take Tokyo. Well, where the British didn't get to, their lucky knockout of the Japanese, they did get to take Tokyo, which expands the British financial power greatly. That ends the British turn. Now it is the Japanese turn. Now the Japanese are reigning conquestians, can now afford an industry. You can see they spend the Japanese spend $15. They'll probably make it back and purchase an industry. At the end of the turn, they'll be able to place it. Now the Japanese expand. That scare with the British was too much. The Japanese are going to reinforce their own capital, so nobody can take it for free, but they're also going to spread out in all directions and take an absolute metric ton of territory. Japanese take Russia, they take Ukraine, they take Eastern Europe, and they take Finland, Norway. This guy's also going to step up here into Eastern Canada now. He's going to step over here into to the Western United States and nab that too for the great Japanese Empire. Spreading them out quite considerably. That means the Japanese went up 8, 11, 14, 16 on their conquests in Europe, and 10, which means the Japanese are collectively up 26. Which brings them up to a collective 44. just with this little takeover, the Japanese are now about a step away from an economic victory. We're also going to spread out the chips. We're not going to leave them stacked here. So, you know, the great Japanese Empire has now grown considerably in power in this turn. Well, thus ends the Japanese turn. A very, very profitable turn. $44 is the Japanese final pay for this turn. These are very close to economically ruling the world, and they're going to put a nice industry on Caucasus so that next turn some of that money can be used to build stuff, which means we'll get to show you the building mechanic. It's the same as in original Axis and Allies. I say that to you, internet audience, who probably doesn't know how to play that game. Rest in peace. Russians did not afford an industry at the start of the turn. Ekenheim German turn. Now the Russians did not reinforce the Russian territory, but the Germans did not have enough men to take them anyway, so the Germans will send one guy here to Var. The Japanese will now have to contest because they now have enemies on both sides. Neither are as strong as the Japanese, they both are yet enemies, stunt the Japanese further conquest. They cannot afford any more industry, and cannot make any further conquest. The Germans will get paid, and the Dutch turn.
There, dear, don't fret!
No, I haven't!
The British still cannot do too much, I don't believe. No, they can't. No. Yes, they can. The British can now also afford an industry. $15. I have one with a 10. Here's their industry. At the end of their turn, the British have no moves because they can't do anything, so they get a card. They get Jack. Jack is at 10. Also, you may notice that I've always put their carded unit on their capital. That is a rule. Whatever their card unit is, they get at the end of their turn, unless it's a king, which has explicit others, must. That's a Japanese tank. Must go on their starting capital. They do not have to put their industry on the screen. I will do that because I like doing that. But you can place your industry on any territory you control. So that ends the British turn. The British place their capital here on the West Indies. Next turn, the British will be able to buy things. They will not have to get only the units of their card. Okay. First, the Japanese are paying $30. $30. 10 infantry. Can only be placed on their territories with industries. 24. 2 fighters. Fighter jets. 1 industrial roll, which means that they're gonna aim for a 6, hoping to get a fancy thing. So now they're gonna industrial roll. They miss. That's just $5 wasted. But the Japanese have the money to waste. They'll get their card at the end of their turn. It's now Japanese military time. So the Japanese, we're going to continue pushing into Europe, but with the Russian threat there of reclaiming territory that the Japanese are going to send one guy down here into southern Europe, sliding around Russia. This one chips. And that's another thing. Turn movement, there's offensive moves and defensive moves. You have to move everything offensively before you move anything defensively. This chip is going to become the guy. Because the chip underneath of whatever unit is worth whatever unit sits in. We're going to go down here, invade Persia. Also, the Great Empire of Japan. They're not going to risk losing Russia to the Germans. It's not a worthy exchange. So they're not going to go after Nantucket or Kazan here in the middle of Europe, or in the middle of Asia. Okay, so the Japanese, this is their defensive moves now. They're going to move that there, combine 2 guys with Australia and the chip from Ukraine. And 1 guy is going to hop from Finland over to Karelia. The offense is against that singular Russian guy all alone. Far too far away from home. The Japanese have now hit the top cap, which means the Japanese now have 1 turn to hold at least $45 worth of territory, and they win the game. The Japanese have already put themselves, because this Central Europe, Asia pocket, and the North American. Oh, I forgot to move in the North American. These are doing good. Anyway, like North America and this Asia are so valuable that holding as much of this Japan does, Japan's basically about to win. So it was a quick game. So is now Russia's move. Everyone has no choice but to make as many moves as possible against Japan. And really, not many people have any moves against Japan. Oh, I forgot. place Japanese here. Now go scream in the comments if you'd like. Do not, I forgot to do something. At the end of the Japanese turn, they have to place the units. The units replace territory with the industry. Purchase card units. They got a queen, which means the Japanese honor. So basically, they just put themselves out an air force pretty quickly. Well, it is now the German turn. The Germans have only, or not the German turn, the Russian turn. The Russians have one option, and that is to attempt to attack what they can. Hail Mary, knock the British down, not the Russian, not the Japanese down, not the British down. So he's going to take a one-on-one. Very low odds, it would normally not be worth it, but at this point it's a Hail Mary. And that guy gets that shot off. Russian 1, misses. Japanese 1, Japanese 2 hits. And this guy dies, and there was no territory was taken from the Japanese. Now the Russians are up and down nothing. Money doesn't really matter because the game's about to end unless the Germans take Moscow. German turn. I'm going to take a move. The Germans usually decide to go back and follow through the proper procedure with the Russians, but like the Russians end of turn, but it's not, if he doesn't win this Hail Mary here, and I don't even know if it wins them, I have to go and count all the Japanese spaces and make sure costing them 8 will drop them below 45, but okay, German going for a 1, misses, Japanese defensive 2, misses, German going for a 1, misses, Japanese defensive 2, hits, there, and that's the game. The British don't have anything that can hit the Japanese. The Japanese built an invincible empire and already gets an economic victory. As you can see, this game is heavily dependent on those first few random turns, and it can really dictate everything. However, I've seen the game twist. You know, people who really had it at the beginning, lost it later on. It's just this territory is so valuable that if something like that happens down here, unless somebody contests it quickly, the game's just over. With the Germans and the Russians locked in a successful, deadlock, the British landlocked, and the Japanese overcoming their lock, they had a contest. It should have been a stalemate, but, Americans got so unlucky, the Japanese just destroyed them, that it was almost game over, especially with how valuable what's around the Japanese already. And then rolling America, that's huge, because this is the most valuable territory set. And having it uncontested, if you controlled all of this, you are very close to having, economic victory alone, controlling Asia, something. So that's generally just how it's played. Like, this is my rule set, and really beyond that first little randomness, there's not too much else. I guess I should tell you what the other face cards do. So aces are, I'll use the Japanese pieces because they won. Aces awards you a battleship. It's just all they give you. Queens, give you Bonner, Jacks, award you tank, Kings, award you capital, which is, a special piece and idea. It gives you, and you got to see that because it's the hardest to explain, so thankfully. And a joker provides you a random anything. So this means anything and its number is random. So it literally could give you any piece on the board and in a random amount up to the maximum based upon the number of chips that are left. So the chips are these things under here. Dime is 10, red is 5, individual chips are 1. So it'll look at the absolute maximum number of chips left, which is not like, oh, I got like the whole stack of white chips. No, it's always rounded down. So it's based upon primarily the number of dimes that are left. Then then plus 10, because that's, you can have then 4 white chips, 1 red chip, and whatever piece it is on top. So right now it would be 40 is the maximum of each one of these, and both are decided by the very random wheel that dictated everything else for the Joker. And then cards are and number cards are infantry only. Infantry X that number. How you use them. And I believe this is the end of the video. Thank you for sticking around. I'm sorry, I admit this video is a little bit to buy time because something went wrong behind the scenes. And now a video I wanted to film can't happen. Next week's my birthday. I've been planning that video out since I first started the channel, so get ready for that. If you didn't love this video, well, hopefully you'll like it more when I play this game with friends and not by myself. It'll be a little more entertaining, hopefully a lot more funny. So, I understand if you didn't love this video. Thank you for watching to this point. If you didn't like it, smash like if you wish to see me play more board games alone on the floor of my bedroom. Or if your name is Fizzy. If your name is Fizzy, smash like.